My brother married a woman who hated me for being a mom. She stole my child during her reception, so I had her arrested that night. I've been married to my husband, Lucas, for the past 5 years. We met on a blind date arranged by our mutual friends. Honestly, I was hesitant at first. The idea of meeting a complete stranger and trying to form a connection felt intimidating. But the moment I saw Lucas, something just clicked. What was supposed to be a casual evening quickly turned into something far more meaningful. As we spent more time together, it became obvious that our bond went deeper than the surface. Conversations flowed naturally. Being around him felt comfortable, and we kept discovering more things we had in common. It didn't take long for us to realize we had something truly special. Our relationship quickly grew from simple outings to a deeper, more meaningful partnership. We began sharing our hopes, dreams, and plans for the future. After months of dating, we decided to take the next step. Surrounded by our closest family and friends, we pledged our lives to one another in a heartfelt ceremony. Our wedding day was filled with love and joy, and I still remember every detail. The way Lucas looked at me as I walked down the aisle, his brother Kyle cheering him on as best man, the laughter of our family and friends, and the overwhelming happiness that surrounded us. That day remains one of the most joyful moments of my life, when everything felt perfectly right, and our love was celebrated in the most beautiful way. From the beginning, both Lucas and I dreamed of having children. Even in the early days of our relationship, we would talk about becoming parents. It was something we both wanted deeply. We pictured a home filled with the sound of little feet running through the halls, the rooms echoing with children's laughter, and the joy of raising and guiding a new life together. But the journey to parenthood turned out to be much harder than we imagined. For what felt like an eternity, we tried everything, yet pregnancy never came. I carefully tracked my ovulation, planning every detail with so much hope. We made huge lifestyle changes, giving up drinking and smoking, sticking to a strict fitness routine, and adjusting our diet to include only what would create the best chance for conception. Despite all our dedication, month after month ended in disappointment. We couldn't understand why, especially when we were doing everything right. Eventually, we turned to doctors for answers. Both of us went through thorough checkups, hoping for clarity or a solution. But when the results came back, they told us nothing was wrong. Everything appeared normal. The advice was simple: be patient and give it time. Hearing that was both comforting and frustrating. On one hand, it was a relief to know there wasn't a medical issue preventing us from conceiving. On the other, being told to just wait felt uncertain and hollow. Patience, as people say, is a virtue, but it's incredibly difficult to practice when you're waiting for something your heart longs for so badly. Still, Lucas and I held on to hope, dreaming of the day I would finally see that positive pregnancy test and how we would celebrate that moment. As luck would have it, last year our patience was rewarded. It began with me missing a period, not unusual, but enough to catch my attention. Soon after, I started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, I brushed it off as stress, or maybe a minor bug. But when my best friend Vivian heard about my symptoms, she immediately suspected something I hadn't dared to believe yet. Without hesitation, she showed up at my place with a handful of pregnancy tests. My heart raced as she handed them to me. Could this really be happening? Vivian and I were both shaking as I tore open the first kit, tears already in my eyes at the thought that I might finally be pregnant. The anticipation was overwhelming. Hope and joy filled me the moment it happened. The test confirmed I was pregnant. I remember staring at those 2 lines in disbelief, unable to process what I was seeing. Vivian and I burst into screams of happiness, jumping and hugging as the realization hit us. After so many months of waiting and wishing, the moment had finally arrived. That evening, I knew I wanted to share the news with Lucas in a way he would never forget. He had been by my side through every step of this journey, and I wanted the memory of this milestone to be just as special for him. With Vivian's help, I planned a simple but heartfelt surprise. We decorated the living room with balloons and picked up a small cake to celebrate. It wasn't elaborate, but it felt perfect. When Lucas walked in from work, he immediately looked puzzled by the decorations, laughing as he asked if I had accidentally confused the date with his birthday. I just stood there, smiling and barely able to contain my excitement. Instead of answering, I handed him the pregnancy test. It took a moment for him to realize what he was holding, but then his face shifted, from confusion to shock, and finally, to pure, unrestrained joy. He shouted with excitement, swept me into his arms and spun me around in a hug. After everything, the waiting, the heartache, the endless hope, we finally had our miracle. We were going to be parents. Throughout my pregnancy, every visit to my gynecologist filled me with happiness. I would come home beaming, clutching the latest ultrasound image of our baby. Each one went straight onto the fridge, creating a collage that grew with time. Every time I passed by, I couldn't resist glancing at those tiny pictures, my heart swelling with joy at the reminder that our little one was growing and thriving. Lucas and I poured ourselves into preparing for our daughter's arrival. We decorated the nursery together, carefully choosing colors, furniture, and little decorations that would make the room warm and inviting. Shopping for baby clothes became one of our favorite activities. Every tiny outfit felt like a symbol of the love and excitement we already had for her. We picked out strollers, car seats, and all the essentials with such thought and care, imagining how everything would come together once our baby arrived. When we reached the 12-week mark, a milestone we had been anxiously waiting for, Lucas and I decided it was time to share the news with our families. We wanted the announcement to feel personal and memorable, so we planned a small dinner at our house. We invited only our closest family members, telling them it was just a casual get-together. No one suspected a thing, and we were buzzing with anticipation to see their reactions. The evening arrived, and the house filled with warmth, laughter, and conversation. As I looked around, I noticed Lucas's younger brother, Kyle, had shown up with a girlfriend. I was a little surprised. We had made it clear that this was supposed to be a family-only dinner, so it caught me off guard that he had brought someone without asking first. But knowing Kyle's impulsive personality, Lucas and I decided not to make an issue of it. Kyle introduced his girlfriend, Jasmine, to everyone. She was divorced with a child from her previous marriage and noticeably older than him. They had apparently met recently at the gym and hit it off quickly. Throughout the evening, however, Kyle and Jasmine acted like infatuated teenagers. They kept touching, kissing, and whispering to each other in ways that were hard to ignore. The overly affectionate behavior, especially in front of everyone, felt uncomfortable. I could sense I wasn't the only one uneasy with it. Still, I refused to let their behavior overshadow the evening. When we all sat down to dinner, Lucas and I exchanged a quick look, silently agreeing that it was time. Lucas cleared his throat, his voice filled with excitement as he said, "We have something to share with you all." At that moment, I brought out the collection of ultrasound pictures I had been saving. Holding them up with a smile, I announced, "We're pregnant." For a second, the room went silent as everyone absorbed the words. Then, in an instant, the quiet turned into an explosion of joy. Family members leapt from their seats, rushing to hug us, congratulate us, and share in our happiness. Happiness overflowed, and the atmosphere became electric with excitement and love. Lucas's parents were especially thrilled. This would be their first grandchild, and I could see pride and joy shining in their eyes. They knew how much we had struggled, and the news meant everything to them. My own mother was crying as she hugged me tightly. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her cheeks. I smiled through my own tears and nodded. "Yes, Mom, I'm more than okay." My brother and his wife embraced both Lucas and me, overjoyed that we were finally becoming parents. They promised to support us and share tips on raising a baby. I admitted I felt nervous and often overthought every little decision. My brother reassured me that he had felt the same way before his daughter was born, and his wife agreed. In that moment, nothing else mattered but the love and support surrounding us. This was exactly what Lucas and I had always dreamed of: family, joy, and unity. And it was finally becoming reality. The evening was filled with so much celebration, but one person stood out uncomfortably: Jasmine. While everyone else shared in our happiness, she sat motionless in her chair, glaring at us with unmistakable anger. Her cold expression was so different from the joy around her that it was impossible to ignore. Uneasy, I quietly asked Kyle about it when he came over to hug me. I wondered if we had somehow offended her, though I couldn't think of anything that might explain her behavior. Kyle simply shrugged it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. He seemed entirely unconcerned, almost as if this was normal for her. As the night went on, we all moved into the living room to enjoy dessert and wine. Naturally, I avoided drinking, and Lucas joined me in solidarity. We settled in, and the conversation shifted to babies and pregnancy. Proudly, I shared details about the nursery we had been working on, eager to describe the warm, cozy space we were creating for Cece. All the while, Jasmine remained quiet, barely saying a word. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke up, asking if she could see our nursery. Her request caught me off guard, but I saw no harm in it. After all, she was a mother herself, and maybe she wanted to offer suggestions. I agreed and led her to the room. The moment we stepped inside, I noticed her expression. She didn't look impressed at all. Instead, she immediately began criticizing. She said the room was too bright for a baby to sleep in, and suggested we hadn't thought it through. I explained calmly that we planned to install blackout curtains to darken the room when needed, but she brushed off my response. Next, she took issue with our choice of yellow paint, insisting it wasn't neutral enough. Surprised, I told her yellow was simply a color and had nothing to do with gender. She then turned to the baby clothes neatly arranged in the drawers, scoffing as she remarked that her son had never liked outfits like those. She claimed we should have consulted other parents before buying what she dismissed as cheap knockoffs. Her condescending tone cut deep. Up until then, I had tried to remain polite, assuming she was just blunt, but this was too much. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, unable to hide the frustration in my voice. Her comments stung, especially after all the love and effort Lucas and I had put into preparing for our baby. It was obvious she wasn't offering advice. She was intentionally trying to dampen our joy. Just as she opened her mouth to reply, my mother and mother-in-law entered the nursery. Their faces lit up as they admired the room, showering me with praise about how beautiful everything looked. For a moment, their warmth softened the tension. Still, I wasn't ready to let Jasmine's behavior slide. I turned back to her, repeating my question. With a firm tone, I asked her, "What exactly did you mean by that?" Both my mother and mother-in-law immediately noticed something was wrong. My mother, sensing the tension, asked me what had happened. I didn't hesitate to explain that Jasmine had been criticizing the nursery, and had even gone so far as to call the baby clothes we picked cheap. Both of them were shocked, clearly surprised that someone would be so openly critical during such a special moment. My mother-in-law laughed in disbelief and turned to Jasmine. "Is this true?" she asked. Caught off guard by the sudden attention, Jasmine tried to soften her earlier remarks. She claimed the clothes felt rough to the touch and that she was only suggesting I consider softer options. But neither my mother nor my mother-in-law believed her. They both shook their heads, touching the outfits and pointing out how smooth and comfortable they were. Jasmine quickly backtracked, insisting that as a mother she knew better, and that I should learn to accept criticism with an open mind. Before I could respond, my mother stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "Well, we're mothers too," she said, "and we would never say something like that to her. You should know better than anyone how difficult it is to be a first-time mom." My mother-in-law backed her up. "This isn't your place to criticize, Jasmine," she added. "It's one thing to offer advice, but this isn't the way to do it." Jasmine's face turned red with embarrassment as she realized she was outnumbered and out of line. Looking offended, she didn't argue further. Instead, she stormed out of the nursery in a huff. I followed to make sure things didn't escalate. She walked straight to Kyle, who was still in the living room chatting with family. Without much explanation, she announced that she wanted to go home. Kyle looked confused but didn't press her. Instead, he apologized to everyone, congratulated us again, and left with her. Later, Kyle reached out to both Lucas and me to apologize for Jasmine's behavior. He had already heard from my mother-in-law, who had given him a stern lecture about bringing her to such an intimate gathering. I knew this wasn't really Kyle's fault, so I forgave him without hesitation. He sounded genuinely concerned and wanted to explain why Jasmine might have acted the way she did. Kyle told us that Jasmine had gone through trauma related to pregnancy. She became pregnant with her son at just 16. Later, after marrying her husband, they hoped to have more children but faced complications. Years of failed attempts and emotional strain eventually broke down her marriage. According to Kyle, seeing other women's pregnancies was still painful for her, which might explain her harsh reaction during our celebration. As a fellow woman, I felt sympathy for Jasmine. I could imagine the pain, disappointment, and scars her experiences had left behind. Still, I couldn't ignore how inappropriate and hurtful her remarks had been that night. I decided it would be best to keep some distance from her at future family events to protect the positive atmosphere I wanted for our growing family. Kyle and Jasmine continued dating, and when I gave birth to Cece, Kyle called Lucas asking if he could bring her over to see the baby. Though we had doubts, Lucas and I reluctantly agreed, hoping things might be different. Sadly, it was a mistake. The first thing Jasmine said upon seeing our baby was a comment about how little hair she had, suggesting this meant she'd grow up with very thin hair. Her words stung, and I could see irritation flash across Lucas's face too. It was yet another insensitive remark, in what should have been a moment filled only with joy. Kyle, sensing the tension, didn't let her linger. After quickly offering congratulations, they both left. This year, Kyle shocked us all with the announcement of his wedding to Jasmine. The news was met with mixed reactions, especially from my mother-in-law. She openly voiced her disappointment in his decision, having never wanted Jasmine to be part of the family. It turned out that my mother-in-law and Jasmine had been clashing for months. Knowing my mother-in-law's naturally warm and kind nature, I could only imagine how much Jasmine's behavior had pushed her limits. Behavior was clearly the source of their ongoing tension. When Lucas called Kyle to talk about the sudden wedding, thinking it was all happening too quickly, Kyle admitted that Jasmine was already 4 months pregnant. He had only found out 2 months earlier and kept it quiet because they didn't want to be judged before tying the knot. Kyle explained that he wanted to marry Jasmine before the baby arrived, which made sense given their circumstances. But during the wedding preparations, Jasmine threw a fit while trying on dresses. She couldn't fit into any of them because of the weight she had gained during pregnancy, and it crushed her dream of wearing the gown she had always imagined. Kyle tried to convince her to choose something more comfortable, but she refused. In the end, she demanded that he push the wedding date back. Originally planned for before the baby's arrival, it was now scheduled for a month after, giving her time to lose weight. Though the change frustrated some people, everyone accepted it. After all, it was Jasmine and Kyle's special day, and they had the right to choose what worked best for them. A month ago, Jasmine gave birth to a baby girl. Lucas and I went to the hospital to congratulate them and to celebrate the new addition before their wedding. Lucas was set to be Kyle's best man. Since we weren't comfortable leaving Cece behind all day, we decided to bring her along. My mother-in-law and I worked out a plan to take turns caring for Cece between us. I even considered hiring a babysitter at the hotel, but with growing concerns about child abductions, I felt safer knowing a family member would be with her. During the reception, my plan was not to drink and to retire early to our room with Cece, ensuring she was looked after properly. But about a week before the wedding, Jasmine called me. In the middle of our conversation, she asked if I was bringing Cece. I told her yes and explained our plan to manage her care throughout the evening. To my shock, Jasmine interrupted and told me she didn't want Cece at the wedding. Stunned, I asked why. She said she wanted her miracle baby to be the center of attention and feared that Cece would steal the spotlight. I reminded her that everyone already knew Cece and that no one could take away from her big day. Still, Jasmine grew more upset and insisted that if I couldn't respect her wishes, I wasn't welcome at the wedding. Things quickly escalated into a heated argument involving Jasmine, Kyle, Lucas, and my mother-in-law. Later, Kyle called me personally to apologize for Jasmine's behavior. He assured me I was absolutely still invited and free to bring Cece, begging me not to take Jasmine's words too seriously. I was furious with Jasmine, so much so that I nearly decided not to attend at all. But I knew how important this was for Lucas and his brother. For the sake of family peace, I pushed aside my feelings and agreed to go, determined to make the best of the day. At the ceremony, a few relatives couldn't help but dote on Cece, cooing over her and commenting on how adorable she looked. Every time Jasmine caught me in her line of sight, she shot me a cold, disapproving glare. It was obvious she still resented me for bringing Cece, even though her baby was clearly the star of the event, and I had done nothing to draw attention away. When the celebration moved to the reception, Lucas, my mother-in-law and I rotated shifts caring for Cece in our hotel room, just as we had planned. My mother-in-law got a little tipsy as the night wore on, but Lucas and I stayed completely sober so we could stay focused on Cece. Then, in the middle of the reception, I noticed my mother-in-law heading quickly into the hall, her face pale and frantic as she searched for me. Something about her expression made my stomach twist. I rushed to her side, Lucas following close behind. Her voice shook as she whispered the words that made my heart drop to the floor. Cece was missing. Lucas's face went pale as he asked her, "What do you mean missing?" Lucas demanded, his voice sharp with panic. He had just left our daughter in his mother's care minutes earlier. That's when my mother-in-law admitted that Jasmine had entered the room shortly after Lucas left. They had spoken briefly, and then she excused herself to use the washroom. But when she returned, both Cece and Jasmine were gone. Lucas and I were stunned, confused, and terrified. We immediately sought out Kyle, demanding to know where Jasmine was and why she would do such a thing. Kyle looked just as shocked, insisting he had no idea what was happening. Amid the chaos of the wedding crowd, we alerted hotel staff to begin searching for both Cece and Jasmine. The staff moved quickly, combing the property, but an hour passed with no sign of them. My fear grew unbearable, and I finally called the police. Kyle tried to calm me, insisting Jasmine would never hurt Cece, but his words meant nothing to me. Jasmine had already shown disturbing behavior, and the thought of her alone with my baby sent waves of dread through me. When the police arrived, we gave statements and explained the situation, trying our best to stay composed. Guests had begun to notice the tension, and the joyous atmosphere of the wedding turned into a cloud of fear and worry. Then finally, a hotel staff member rushed in, saying Cece and Jasmine had been found at the back of the hotel. Heart-pounding, I followed him with Lucas and my mother-in-law, and there she was, Jasmine sitting casually in a chair, holding Cece in one arm and a cigarette in the other. Her own baby was strapped in a carrier beside her. Tears flooded my eyes as I rushed forward, scooping Cece out of her arms and checking her frantically. Lucas exploded, yelling at Jasmine, demanding to know why she had taken our daughter without telling anyone. Jasmine's reply chilled me. She claimed she was only helping my mother-in-law and that she was family now anyway. My mother-in-law, now sober and frantic, screamed at her. She shouted that Jasmine had no right to take Cece without permission, and that disappearing when she stepped into the bathroom was deliberate and deceitful. Jasmine only smirked, turning to me with a cruel remark. "If you were so concerned about your daughter, maybe you should have listened and not brought her to the wedding." It hit me then. She had intentionally taken my child to scare me. She wanted me panicked, desperate, and searching, all to prove a twisted point and force me to obey her in the future. Kyle rushed over, trying to smooth things over, suggesting this was all a misunderstanding. But when the police turned to me and asked if I wanted to press charges, I looked at Jasmine's face. There was no apology, no remorse, just defiance. I knew then I had to act. I told them yes, I wanted to press charges for kidnapping. Jasmine's eyes widened in disbelief as she protested, but the police didn't hesitate. They arrested her on the spot. Kyle begged me to reconsider, but my mother-in-law stood firm, telling him that what Jasmine had done was unforgivable. And so, on what was supposed to be her wedding day, Jasmine spent the night in jail. I barely slept, tossing and turning, haunted by what could have happened to my daughter. Kyle has been calling non-stop, begging us to drop the charges, insisting Jasmine didn't mean any harm. It's been a few weeks since my last post. With the charges filed, there wasn't much I could do for Jasmine, even if I wanted to. The evidence is overwhelming. Hotel CCTV shows her taking Cece from the room, and my mother-in-law has provided a statement confirming Jasmine acted without her consent. Jasmine's hearing is scheduled for next week. In the meantime, tensions with Kyle have escalated. He keeps blaming us for ruining his wife's life by putting her in jail, refusing to acknowledge the danger she put Cece in. Lucas finally snapped and asked him how he would feel if someone had taken his baby away without a word. Kyle had no answer. Lucas and I have since cut ties with him until he can see Jasmine for who she truly is. Thankfully, the rest of the family stands with us, equally disgusted by Jasmine's behavior. At the hearing, Jasmine pleaded guilty to all charges. Her lawyer argued it was an isolated incident, that she'd simply been overly emotional on her wedding day, which led her to behave irrationally. In the end, the judge sentenced her to community service and mandatory counseling, noting it was her first offense. Afterward, Jasmine reached out to both me and Lucas with an apology, but we refused to forgive her. The damage was already done, and nothing could erase the betrayal of what she had put us through. Trust was broken beyond repair, and I knew I could never allow her near my daughter again. Since the incident, both my mother-in-law and father-in-law have cut Kyle off completely. They no longer take his calls and want nothing to do with him as long as Jasmine remains in his life.